Hello, my name is Megan Ogden with NACE. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Is your employer brand a Gen Z magnet or repellent? It's my pleasure to introduce Jason Miller, a global talent acquisition leader and advisor at Untapped. Take it away, Jason.
Thanks, Megan. Hello, everybody. We are very excited to be meeting with you all today. As Megan mentioned, my name is Jason. I have been lucky enough to be involved with and led early talent programs at a number of companies, most recently at Roblox and previous to that at Cloudera. And I'm joined today by two other folks who are going to chat a little bit about how we see the best ways to attract Gen Z talent. And I'll have them talk a little bit about themselves. First off, Nicole from Gusto, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. My name is Nicole. I'm with Gusto. I've been with Gusto for about 3 years. I'm currently in our SF office. I tried to put myself away from everybody, so it's relatively quiet over here. But I'm a team of 2, so I kind of lead our intern and early career programming here at Gusto, as well as thinking around, future strategy of attracting early career talent. And then previous to Gusto, I was in a similar role over at a larger tech company. That program there was really big. We'd hire like 250 interns a year and like 250 new grads. Currently at Gusto, our program is much smaller. We have about 2,600 employees here. We have an intern program, probably of about 50 or so every year. And then we primarily use that to hire to our new grad and early career roles. But I will popcorn it over to Brittany.
Hey everyone, Brittany Mitlow here with Duolingo. Duolingo is headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I'm sitting in our headquarters right now. We are in office, we were just talking about this beforehand, Tuesday through Thursday, and then welcome to come in on Mondays and Fridays, but I fully take advantage of work from home at that time. Like I said, been at Duolingo for 5 years, so I've actually helped us 10x in terms of company size. We're at close to 700 people now. This coming year, we're going to have about 80 new graduates joining us and 100 interns, so pretty significant population size for our early talent coming in. And then the actual team itself, I lead up our university recruiters. We have 3 university recruiters and 2 programs people, so we're a team of about 8 of us when all of this is said and done though. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. Both in the office. I was like, wow, check those backgrounds out. Let's go ahead and get started. So the way to camp today is really to understand that Gen Z is the future of the companies that we are recruiting for. You'll see here by 2026, it's going to be the largest talent pool. And one of the things that Untapped has done is we have gone forth and tried to figure out as much as we could about that talent pool. So we did a sentiment study of just about 800 folks from the Gen Z talent pool. And what we're going to do in the next couple of slides is we want to walk you through some of our findings. It's mixed from both that sentiment study, also some data that we've taken from partnering with Greenhouse. And there's really kind of 4 core pillars that have landed. And then take that into a discussion with Brittany and with Nicole and myself about how we feel those 4 pillars have impacted our practices. And then, as Megan mentioned, we really want to be here for Q&A as well. So please do make sure and use that Q&A box to type any questions you might have. So I'll do a deeper dive on each of these, but I mean, the 4 core pillars come out to be the importance of your brand and basically that it's authentic. We'll talk a little bit about that, that we do need a strong commitment to DE&I, that talent communities, and we'll talk a little bit about what talent communities are more valuable than they ever have been. And then finally, as we get out of our home offices and dorm rooms and staying at home with parents and whatnot, and we move back into the office, the importance of an events practice and a live events practice more specifically. So number 1, let's talk quickly about brand. So brand, you'll see here, there's three advantages that having a strong talent brand really can do for your practice. The first of which, and I know that there's a good chunk of us that are on this call are in TA, in talent acquisition, is that it is wildly useful in getting people to come to your company. It's not lost on us that the candidate market is one where they have a lot of options. And especially as you get into, technical early talent recruiting, they have a lot of very similar options. So a company that stands by its values, that lives its values, and does a good job of describing to the talent pool what those values are, just makes you a more attractive place for folks to work. Secondly, is it helps people have pride in where they work and that they want to stay. And you'll see this here that, close, almost a third of a reduction in turnover. Those of us that are in talent acquisition, at the end of the day, yes, it's our job to bring people in, but we also want those people that come in to stay and to be proud of where they work and to talk about how great it is, the company they're at, when they talk to their friends, which help with things like employer referrals and such. And then this third piece is it helps your customers want to spend money at the company you work for. See this here, almost 2/3 of consumers say that they would stop purchasing from a brand if they heard how poorly they treat their employees. I'm sure we can all think of a company or two right now where we would camp ourselves in that 64%. So it's a kind of a three-prong attack of bringing people in when people get there, making sure that they're proud to be there, and then finally making sure that our customer base wants to continue to spend money with us, which allows us to do great things like hire more people. Secondly, I'm a little rusty. The importance of DE&I. If you recall from the earlier slide that I put up, that Gen Z, amongst other things, is going to be one of the most diverse talent pools that we've had in history. And this speaks to authenticity as well. You'll see here that 82% of candidates said a company's DE&I reputation is important. And that about 2/3, even if they found their dream job, if DE&I followed that company from a poor reputation, they wouldn't take the job. When I talk about authenticity and I talk about doubling down on DE&I, these are not things like when you stand up a diversity organization just for the sake of standing up a diversity organization. This is people want to understand that the company has an employee set that has a diversity of experience, has a diversity of thought, comes from diverse backgrounds. And they understand that with a target talent pool that is more diverse than ever, they want to come into organizations that are as diverse as what they have experienced. The third piece around communities. So for ancient TA folks like myself, like when people started talking about talent communities, I remember thinking to myself, like, what are you talking about? Like, it didn't even really grok for me. And then I took a step back, and if we're really honest, like, we have always had talent communities. We've always had like our friend networks, our alumni networks, fraternities, sororities, athletics, whatever the heck it may be. We've always, as humans, I think, gravitated toward these talent communities. But the fact of the matter is, with technology, with social media, all that's done is basically simplified and made it possible to really expand talent communities further. So you see here, 8 in 10 job seekers would rather join a talent community before applying information, gathering information. This kind of rings true of the authenticity as well. That if I see a company that I want to work at, and the values that it portrays through its talent brand efforts really speak to me, and then I see this community of like-minded individuals that, I have been a Roblox game creator in this talent community for X number of years, and I see that the folks that actually went to this employer really are having the experience that their talent brand says they're going to have, it just makes me all that much more likely to want to go to that company. And then if you think about the piece I made where a more diverse talent pool wants to work in places where they're going to feel connected and represented and be amongst another diverse set, what better community to share externally than with our internal ERGs? So once again, this is, as I said, the ancient recruiter guy on the call has been doing this for a really long time. When ERGs first started popping up at a company I was working at, and then we started partnering with a TA organization and got to see things like, even as a TA leader, acceptance ratios for folks that had interacted with ERGs were better than the average. Employer referrals were better than the average. Retention is better than the average. If we're putting all these efforts internally, we owe it to ourselves to also show externally to our candidate pool all the advantages of really strong ERGs. And then finally, events. So I made the joke of how I am jealous of Nicole and Brittany being in an office while I sit here in my home office. Events have always been the lifeblood, I would say, of early talent recruiting. I mean, you think of the college fairs early on, or you think about sort of some of the like university ambassador programs or all these sorts of things. At the end of the day, making the decision for your first job, or to just change a job in general, but especially early talent, your first job, you're doing all you can to gather as much information as possible. And what better way to do it in an authentic manner when you're actually with other people that have made that same decision? So once again, 70%, 7 in 10 would rather attend an event before applying to a role. And guess what? Live events are 2.5 times more impactful than the virtual events were. I have a funny story. So I live here in Austin, Texas, really close to UT, and we did our first really small scale live event. I would call it post-pandemic, but it was probably like tail end of the concept of post-pandemic. And we had 15 students from UT in a room. We did the Q&A part of it. And I stood there and I said, I'm the Roblox guy. I'll answer any question you want. And first question that somebody asked was, what's it like to work in an office? And it dawned on me that he had this talent pool that they just, for me, I was expecting what it was gonna be like, do you get free Robux? Or like all the other questions that we tend to get. And there was one student in the room who had an internship in an office that summer. And he was like the guy in the Western who's like, shady in the back. And he's like, I was in an office. And immediately everybody focuses on him. And he starts telling these fables about free snacks and and he says, he said something to the group where he goes, how that time when finals and like everybody's in the library, there's all that kinetic energy. It's like that every day. And that was one of the moments that kind of dawned on me. And some people were like, I hate that feeling. So it's not for everybody. But it really dawned on me this idea that as we get back to, I'm not going to say back to where it was, but as we return to our offices and we get in and amongst people and such, the decision matrix of like what it's going to be like to actually work around these people is going to be more important than ever. So I cannot say enough about how excited I am for in-person career events again, or in-person mixers, or meetups, etc. I'm a guy who kind of like built his career on making really fun t-shirts, and I feel like I haven't been able to give out too many recently. So personally, very excited to get back to the virtual piece. Or excuse me, get away from the virtual piece and get back to the in-person piece. So just to reiterate, 4 pillars around the importance of your brand, the importance of authentically embracing a DE&I strategy, the value that having communities both internally and externally with your practices. And then the final piece around the power of events. We want to go ahead and start to chat a little bit about that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and start chatting with my friends over here about them. Nicole and Brittany, let me stop sharing. Okay. So one of the things I was really excited about when I found out that I was going to be doing this with Brittany and Nicole is it's two different companies. Like I have young kids, so like working at Roblox doesn't impress them anymore because I work for the cool company. But like I told one of them that I'm talking to somebody from Duolingo, and they got like super excited. So you've got this one brand that is really well known, and then you've got Gusto, which doesn't carry the same name cachet as a Duolingo. But both of you are doing stuff with Talent Brand. So I was hoping we could kind of kick it off there with like comparing and contrasting. Maybe Nicole, you go first. Like how you have seen the importance of brand, how maybe Untapped has helped you get the brand out there at Gusto.
Yeah, thank you for that. We talked about this in our prep, and I'm like, hey, we have such different perspectives, like you said, because Brittany is at a company that has this amazing like consumer brand recognition. Like everybody has probably used Duolingo or heard of Duolingo, or their family member uses it. And Gusto, unless you're like a small business owner trying to pay your employees, you may not know what Gusto is. And that's what we do. We help small businesses, small medium-sized businesses kind of like operate, use efficiencies in their operations with like HR, payroll, benefits. That's not like a sexy like brand, I guess, like employee brand. So students, they're thinking like, what products have I used? And they're kind of gravitating towards those companies. But we know that we have a really special experience here, both with interns and new grads. Most of our engineering teams are full stack teams. So it's a really cool opportunity for early career to get in and like become a very well-rounded engineer. We have a really collaborative engineering culture, a lot of pair programming, a lot of working cross-functionally. And so it's important for us to try and communicate that to candidates during the interview process and even before. It's been a really big goal of ours. We have a school agnostic strategy. So there are pros and cons. Obviously, we have a smaller program. It's lower cost to do school agnostic when we do pretty much virtual only events. So the pro is that we can reach more people, but the con is that we're not investing that money in specific schools. So we're not getting our brand out there in the same way that like Duolingo might, or on the call your company might. So we have to work really hard at it. And one thing that we do that I think is really important is we like to create virtual events that we can use as a way to source new candidates, tell them about Gusto, have something to give back to them. And then hopefully that attracts them enough to apply and get into our interview loop. So some events that we've done using Untapped, it's been really helpful for us because we can source the marketplace almost like a LinkedIn, and then also gather the analytics and then, invite them to apply. Some really big events for us have been like our intern AMA. So we bring previous interns and they talk about their day in the life, what projects they've worked on. We really focus on like the impact they've had to the company, to customers. We do talk a lot about like our community and our culture, and really try and showcase our values that are really key for us. I know that ties into the next pillar too, and really spend time answering questions. And we try and do, I think this touches on the community piece, but we also try and do breakout rooms at the end of events too, if we can, so that they can have more one-on-one or smaller group time with recruiters or engineers here. So for us, it's been really key doing these events. We've also done like how to prepare for technical interviews. Our RISE team, which is our DEI team, it's representation, inclusion, social impact, and equity. They help us decide like our conference strategy. So they took a bunch of engineers and recruiters over to Afrotech, and we were able to use Untapped as well. So when there were interns coming, there was a really cool QR code. We were able to gather all their information and then immediately like get them into our interview process. So for us, I think events has just been a really big way for us to showcase our brand and kind of hope that we can sell them on Gusto as early as possible.
So thank you. You kind of walked us through a handful of the pillars. I appreciate that. You gave us a little preview of some stuff we'll come back to. But stepping really quick back to the brand piece, I wanted to hear a little bit about how it compares and contrasts out of Duolingo, kind of how you built out your employer brand with already being a consumer name.
Yeah, definitely. So for us, very lucky to have this consumer name. And then also because we're a product, our main product has been around for 10 years. A lot of our applicants now who are university students grew up with Duolingo. So it's like this very deep emotional tie that candidates have. And even 5 years ago, we were seeing students who, or most of our applicants for university were active users or had at least used it once, or they did have like at least a family member who had used it. So our candidate pool has continued to be people who are super hyper aware of our products. But what's been nice is that we're able to take this brand that we have of being very inclusive, very equitable, like a product brand. And that is very true of our employer brand too. So now it's like, it's been interesting the past year or two of like that, complementing the product brand with our employer brand and like sharing more about how it's not just our product, although that does give insight into like the type of company we are, but sharing and just communicating what we have here at Duolingo. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of talent acquisition people have, especially if you've been in an organization for at least a couple of years and like you've been quote unquote drinking the Kool-Aid and like you innately know what you have here at this company, but sometimes it takes like really just putting down on paper or being really thoughtful with your events or thoughtful with what's on your career site of what is offered at your company. Because again, it's like very innate for those who've been internal somewhere, but if you're not communicating it, nobody else knows, right? So I think that's like sort of the first big hurdle is that communication. And that leads, and you know, authenticity continues to be like, I feel like a buzzword, but it's so important. Like as long as you're very communicative about what why your company is going to be really beneficial to a certain population, whether it's early talent, it's industry, it's underrepresented populations, like as long as you can communicate the why, I think everything else follows really nicely.
That's great. Great. And I agree with you. I know we said the word authentic a lot, but I think that as you get to an earlier talent or even younger, like my kids, like I never knew my parents were cringe. I didn't know what that word was, but like my kids let me know all the time the stuff what I do is cringe. So like, yeah, I mean, authenticity matters, and it matters to your point that what you're doing inside, you want to make sure when you say you're doing it outside that it checks out. And it actually is a nice sort of leeway into the DE&I piece. So I mean, you mentioned the efforts you've done there, and I know when we talked a little bit, you know, pre-gaming for this, you were mentioning some of the summits that you had built out as well. Do you want to double click on that a little bit?
Yeah, and this actually ties nicely into some of these open questions that we have here about talent communities and like types of events. So for us, we have built, we take a long view. It's actually one of like our Duolingo pillars, talk about drinking the Kool-Aid, but taking the long view of like building relationships with organizations, whether it's school specific or it's national organizations, where we know it's not going to be just transactional for that year. It's going to be a multi-year, as long as like both parties are putting in the work and we're seeing those results, that it's going to be a multi-year, hopefully like multi-decade relationship that we're building. So two organizations that really stand out as far as like school agnostic. So Nicole, I'm sure you're familiar with them, but Rewriting the Code, which is geared towards women in tech, and then Color Stack, which is geared towards Black and Latinx talent in tech, both university specific. We've built really deep relationships with both of those organizations over the past couple years. And so we will do events specifically with those orgs. Most of them are going to be virtual because they're school agnostic, but then we also host our own internal summits. So we'll rely on external opportunities as well as creating our own to really bring in and attract talent. And then that in themselves, like our summits have created talent communities. So it's just a talent community is just people who are looking in the same roles or for the same types of companies. It's like, again, like that sort of broad general term that we've all like worked with before, but haven't been able to like put a name to. But then also like these school agnostic organizations that are national, international, as well as school specific organizations are really strong sources of talent, especially at some of those larger tech tech focused colleges. So yeah, it's been really rewarding though, being able to create things and build these tech communities, talent communities that then we see come back year over year and apply and come to these events, and we're like seeing them all over the place, in person and virtual. So I definitely encourage you to, like, if you're not seeing something in the marketplace that works for you and your company, to create it yourself.
I love that. Yeah. And you're right. I think we are doing a good job of kind of interlacing some of these Q&A questions. And one of them talks a little bit about data. So I'll answer that, but then I want to make sure that we go back to you and Nicole and talk about the RISE report, because I love it and I want to go deeper on it. But there was a question around sort of where we got this data from that we shared. Just so y'all know, it's one of the big pillars for Untapped is that it's all self-reported data. Like we talk about authenticity. We are a platform that when students interact with us, they know what we are. This is not a platform where, perhaps you signed up for it to be able to communicate directly with your university, and then all of a sudden now it's helping you find a job. So what we did was we went to the Untapped community and asked them a series of questions to gather their sentiment, and we got just shy of about 800 responses. So Marie, I hope I'm saying your name right. That's where we got all this stuff from, and that'll be included in the deck that I think Megan will talk to you guys about how you get your hands on in a week or so after this. But staying camped with data and with analytics, can we go back a little bit and talk a little bit deeper, Nicole, about the RISE report and really make sure you land that acronym, because I hadn't heard of it before you shared it with me.
Well, it's because we made it up, we created it. And I think they want to trademark it. I'm not sure, but yeah. So our DE&I team is called RISE, Representation, Inclusion, Social Impact, and Equity. It's a framework that we use for everything at Gusto. So it's not just hiring. It's also how we're building our products. We're taking a RISE lens. How we're fostering community internally. We're taking a RISE lens. How are we approaching our performance reviews? We're making sure there's a RISE lens. It's just really key and integral to everything we do. And as part of our commitment to RISE, this is going to be internal again, with retention and hiring. We do publish every year an annual RISE report, and it talks about, what commitments we've made, how we made progress, and if we missed the mark in some ways, why is that? And we talk a lot about what we're doing holistically in regards to RISE. And actually, I wanted to kind of circle back on something that Brittany said, because we do invest in what we call our RISE partnerships. So we also work with Rewriting the Code, Color Stack. We just started partnering with EdLift. Really cool way to meet students when you are taking a school agnostic approach, or even if you're not, being able to really show your commitment to RISE or DE&I and invest in these long-term relationships and helping underrepresented talent stay in STEM and get the skills they need to be successful in STEM after they graduate. So that's really important. And then I think just with that too, this is something I know I need to do a better job for our team, but really making sure that we do tap into our employee resource groups or affinity groups more to I know those engineers and our ICs really are excited about talking to interns, helping them understand, or early career talent, what it would be like to work at Gusto. So just making sure that we can rely on them too to participate in the recruiting process when it makes sense and when they have the desire to do that. But there's lots of ways to do it. Talk about the community too. We've thought a lot about how do we get them involved earlier on? So once a candidate gets into the interview process, can they meet with someone from an affinity group before they decide to accept an offer? So we have done that in pockets, and we're hoping to build it out in a bigger, more official program for our intern hiring specifically for next year. So more to come on that.
Awesome. RISE. So I love branding. So I remember when you said that, I was like, that's so cool.
I was going to say real quick, Nicole, that actually the ERG, and I know it's another question out here and we're running out of time, but an event that we piloted this year was actually having an ERG club fair whenever we had all of our early ID offered candidates. Actually, we flew them into Pittsburgh and had them visit headquarters. And it was before they even had to make their final decision. So it was a sell event, but we had a club fair where we had representatives from all of our ERGs, as well as our social clubs here at Duolingo. And that was a huge hit. So yeah, any way you can tap in, use the resources that you have. And again, it's that authenticity piece.
I love that. And we're doing pretty well on time, because I think we're kind of going back and forth between the Q&A piece. So one of them, the anonymous question, came around examples around talent communities. And I know one of the ones that Brittany, you mentioned to me, was kind of cool, was the talent community to actually help people prepare for their interviews. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So for us with interview prep, we've been building it up year over year. So at first we were really focusing on interview prep right before the final round interview. So we'd actually have a full interview prep day. We piloted it for one of our internship programs last year. We've now scaled it to all of our software engineering internship interview processes, where it's before the final round. We will have an engineer and one of our recruiters, so like the subject matter experts, walking you through how best to break down a problem, how best to answer a behavioral question. There's a huge amount of time for Q&A, and we send a ton of prep materials. So for us, we know that candidates that we're bringing to this final stage, as do most people probably here in this chat, we know that they have those raw skill sets, they have the talent, they have the experience, but it's just making sure to set students up for success, especially for underrepresented populations, where access to these types of materials, access to even some schools provide classes on how to interview isn't available. So we want to make sure that we're providing as much as we can so that students are able to put their best foot forward and feel really prepared without giving them just the straight up answer to the question, right? So it's like any other test prep. If you remember, like in high school, or if you were lucky enough in college, maybe some of your TAs were pretty cool and be like, yeah, let's prep for the test. But for us, that was super important, was because it doesn't just showcase like and help your pipeline, but it showcases like really what's important to your company, and that you're not trying to trick anyone, and that you are like providing this equal access. And it's another way too to just like pre-sell candidates too. So it's like a win-win-win in my opinion. Like for us, we're definitely going to lean a lot more into that prep. But we also do it even for candidates who are not in our process too. So again, like that equitable piece of, we'll have it at these different summits that we offer, or if we are going to schools, or with school agnostic virtual events that we have, we are trying to build that in more and more. So it's not just exclusive to those who are already in our pipeline.
Fantastic. I'll give an example too of a talent community that we haven't touched on that I used to use a lot. So when I was at Cloudera, we were really focused on global expansion, and we went from getting into huge amounts of tech hiring in places like Cork, Ireland, and Budapest, parts of India and such. And we specifically chose a lot of those locations based upon local universities. So we started to create, and it's kind of a silly name now, but we just called it Friends of Cloudera. And we created these localized talent communities specific at the university level, that we would share interesting stuff that we had done. We would share if we were going to go and do an event, because let's imagine, we're going to go try and hire 10 new grads in Eastern or Central Europe in Budapest. It's a much different interview experience out there than say like, going into Brittany's backyard at CMU and like trying to like interview a bunch of people for a fan company. So we found that it was a much longer tail and much more relationship based. And by continually having stuff that we were, and it wasn't like we were sending out swag, it was literally just notices, and we were an open source company, so we'd give them access to different GitHub projects and such. But just realize too that a talent community could even be someplace you're trying to expand that you don't have a footprint at right now. Just like you may not have a particular footprint from a URM, or that you want to expand, you can also do talent communities for like localized expansion as well. All right, I feel like we're still kind of tiptoeing. We've talked about a lot of some cool events. I love the idea of the ERG fair. That one was really neat. We once did at a place where I was at, where we did a similar thing, but instead of it being ERG centric, what it was each individual team set up a booth, and we invited a bunch of intern prospects in so that they could actually get pitched. That I will say, we learned our lesson that you have to set a budget cap, because some teams went completely overboard. And then like some teams went and just showed like a laptop. So we realized that we kind of got to like have it a little bit even. But what about, let's really make sure we hit any other events, and this could go to either of you. Is there any other event that we haven't touched upon that you've had success with you want to share with folks?
I mean, I do think conferences really are coming back. Seeing that stat of I think it was 2 out of 3, if I'm remembering correctly, students wanted in-person events. It was really easy, right, and virtual relative comparatively, right? Like very easy to recruit. We weren't flying all over the country. We weren't shaking a million hands and, sleeping in hotel rooms, but there is a thirst for that in-person connection. Even if the role itself that you're recruiting these students for isn't an in-person opportunity. People want to get to know people. I think we're all still human at the end of the day, as much as we rely on technology. So for us, it was really awesome going to Tapia in September. It was the first time since 2019 that we had been in a conference, and just being able to build those connections and knowing. And I talk a lot about like taking the long view and like long-term strategy. I know that can take buy-in sometimes, depending on what org that you're in, but being able to meet these humans that may not even be able to apply for roles that you have until 1, 2, 3 years from now. But it's, again, like goes back to building up that employer brand. And there are different ways to, whether using like a CRM or if you can use your ATS, but to track that long-term ROI. And again, getting like stakeholder buy-in into it so you can build the business case for it. But I am really excited for us to like ramp back up into in-person conferences and it to just become more and more of a thing again. I think career fairs are like, I feel like they were about to die right before 2020. And then like now there's a resurgence of going back in person. But I think with like on-campus events, it's like more student org focused. Maybe it's more visiting certain classes, building professor connections. I think more of like the on-campus opportunities, at least from what I've experienced, have been like the smaller events where it's not the career fair, it's not like the Mad Dash, because a lot of students more and more are going to these conferences. So it's like a balance and it's not a one size fits all, but that's what we've been seeing.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, like for us, we just don't have the means to go to a lot of conferences. So we pick like a couple that our whole company will sponsor. And while I didn't go to AfroTech, I met with our AfroTech team multiple times to make sure that they felt confident talking about the roles that we had. So just making sure like you're intentional with the events that you do go to and just making sure they're really special and you can, like Brittany was saying, kind of keep track of like who you're meeting. I think something, if you are staying virtual, like we are mainly or have been for intern and early career hiring, the biggest thing I learned, because it goes back to like this touch point and them feeling like they can really connect. So if you do virtual events, making sure you can do breakout rooms. Obviously, if it's a webinar, you have to then set up a separate Zoom, but that has been really important because the interns and the candidates have really enjoyed being able to go into small groups and ask recruiters or engineers questions. So when we did the like intern AMA, we then split them out and had like one engineering intern, it's now a new grad, like lead a breakout room. And so I think that was a really great opportunity and the candidates really loved that.
And I'll tell you, this is by no means earth shattering, but sort of the events that I've seen operate, it's sort of like a breakout room, but an in-person breakout room is you need to have a good ratio of folks from your company as well as the attendees. Like you can think about the career fairs that we've been to where there's a line of like 15 people and everybody walks up to you with their resume and it's like, I'm a rising junior with an interest in data science. There's nothing kind of interpersonal at that point. But if you can use tools like Untapped to be very specific about whom you invite to if you get 50 people in a room, 50 invitees into a room, and you have 30 representatives from your company, half TA, 15 new college grads that are excited because they're going to take home the free food that at the end of it, and then like, intersperse a decent amount of like actual hiring managers or engineers, and you have them meet each other in chat, have somebody get up on stage and talk about why the company's values are great, get somebody who was recently in their shoes to come in and do kind of that, maybe that AMA that you mentioned, or like a day in the life, or like, hey, look, this is my project that I'm working on. And then you get, if it's the technical one, you get somebody who is working on something that's like legitimately cool. And it doesn't have to be consumer facing cool, but it can be big, hairy, scary problem cool, or like, that's kind of like what I just learned about in college cool. Get them to listen to all of those things. And then you use whichever tool you have to continue your communication with them afterwards. That's an event. You may not walk out of there with like, I'm going to interview 6 people tomorrow, but that starts to build that community. And by the way, the trick to get people to stay is not free t-shirts. Everybody hates free, I know there's that big, but like one of the, there's a trick I learned that I thought was awesome and I stole a couple times, is you can offer a college student, I don't know, man, 10 t-shirts Or I saw a company once do their raffle prize, which gets pulled at the end, so they have to stay and they have to listen to the presentations and all that stuff, was Chipotle for lunch and dinner for you and your friend for 30 days. So that's like maybe a $300 spend, $500 spend. You better believe every kid stuck around, because I mean, you're talking at that point of like, was that like 60 burritos? Those are the kind of, and then that word travels fast too. It's like, oh, these are the guys that were giving away that. That's all you got to do, is to go back to it, something authentic, something sticky to make you stand out, but then also an opportunity to really present what it is your company's doing and how they fit into it. Maybe that's something I haven't really talked about. We haven't done a lot today, but like, people have to understand how they fit into the solution. So you show them the problem, you show them why you want them to be there, and then they get to imagine themselves helping solve that problem. Okay, let's go back to the Q&A really quick. We definitely talking about events. This is a good one, and maybe either of you could hide me in this, but what type of interaction do candidates want with the ERGs? Do they want to hear more about like what the ERGs specifically do? Do they want to, connect more directly with like members of the ERGs? Like, so, Brittany or Nicole, either one of you guys can take this, but can you talk about your experience about early talent and how they like to interact with your ERGs?
I can start, and then if Brittany wants to tag on. I know for us, I get a lot of questions about it during kind of like the recruiter call, and they'll ask like, what are, we call ours affinity groups, but like, what are those at Gusto? How are interns allowed to join? So we spend time just kind of explaining the groups that we have, that they're allowed to join. And then we do have this program, it's called a CAP chat, and it's community ambassador program. So we have members of these affinity groups that say like, hey, I'll talk to a candidate that's received an offer and I'll answer any questions that they have. It's super informal and casual, not like an actual interview. We haven't relied on that as much for interns because there's such a big volume of interns, and we want to save the CAP ambassadors also for like industry hires, but that is something that we're wanting to build out just for like our intern and early career hiring, so that if they wanted to opt in and talk to someone from an affinity group, that they have the ability to do it.
Yeah, and then for us, pretty similar. So there's a big focus of, and I think I mentioned this, right, of just like communicating and sharing what we have, not everything that's internal at Duolingo that we have on our career site. So a lot of it will just be educating candidates on what's offered at Duolingo. So whether that's at our virtual or in-person events, it's at our prep sessions, we're always sprinkling in information. Our recruiters are really good about that too, during those conversations of like finding out what's important to a candidate and then showcasing if it is, hey, are there people who look like me or have the same background as me or same interests as me? Is there a space for me, right? Like, am I going to be able to like feel like I can be my full self at Duolingo day in and day out? So it's just like a lot of communication, verbalizing, but then actually getting our ERGs involved. If candidates like really want to meet with individuals, we use Slack. For those of you who don't know, it's just like a messaging tool. But we have our Slack channels for our ERGs. And if we have specific events that are coming up, like the summits that I mentioned, or if we are having some sort of virtual recruitment event, we'll post in those ERGs and ask for volunteers. We'll also just post it in like our random channel too, so that everyone knows about it. So it's not as much like, other than like our ERG fair, which was like so fun. And again, I cannot wait to do it again, but like we will make sure to just put it out there generally for the population too. So then you're not tokenizing a group either. So if it is if like it is an event that is focused for women in particular, we will post it at Women at Duolingo, but then also in random too, so that anyone who's interested can be a part of it. And I think that's a really big part too, is just like open invitation, and those who feel really strongly, and like whether it's about early talent or increasing women in tech, they can be a part of it.
That's awesome. So I just had a question pop up about ambassador programs, and I know I'm the one to kind of slip that in, so I can talk to it. But first off, do you guys have any experience with some success stories with your ambassador programs out of campus?
Yeah, so we really ramped up our ambassador program this year. This is our second official year doing it. There was with 2020 and beyond, we weren't able to really implement it too much. So it's already in our minds, but we have an official program that kicked off now that we've gotten larger too. This year we have incentives and sort of like check boxes that our ambassadors have to hit. So they have to host a certain number of events. It can be any size, and they have to check in within our programs team if that counts as like an event. But we have like all these like parameters, right? So we have like all these different check boxes. They have to attend an event that we're hosting, whether it's virtual or in person. We have swag that they hand out on campus, and then they get a stipend at the end of the semester if they hit every checkbox. And it's like maybe 6 hours of work total that it ends up being for the whole semester. Plus I know that some people like swag, good, bad, but like our swag is awesome. So like we like have exclusive swag for them, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, we'll do it. We want the swag. But also it's really, really good, especially if you have interns that you're trying to convert to full-time or who have already converted that or you don't want them to renege. It gives you a really, really good indication if people are either going to sign and stay with you until the summer and make sure that they don't leave you. So that's been like, again, win-win-win for us. Like we get our brand out there, especially at universities that we don't have a huge foothold in. And then we make sure that they're actually going to come back in the summer and join us.
I want to see your swag now. All right, thanks. Hey, Nicole, what about you guys?
We don't have an ambassador program right now in that kind of sense. I think it's been a little bit informal where honestly, like we've had amazing interns that just go and tell their friends to, even if they decline offers with us. I've had candidates that like had a great experience. That's something we pride ourselves on, is our candidate experience. It goes back to like the accountability, authenticity, and transparency that we really, really like ingrain in everything we do. But I would say it's more informal right now. I know at my last company, that was something we were spinning up. You're right. I think it's a good indication too, if like candidates are excited and want to stay, and it can kind of give your team maybe early indicators if candidates are reneging, and then you can kind of plan for that. But yeah, right now it's just kind of word of mouth. We don't have a formal program.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've had 2 different opportunities to do some cool ambassador programs, and at Cloudera we got lucky because we actually had some folks that wrote the books the kids were actually studying. So we set up study groups with the book authors, which one day actually turned into a live study group. People started bringing the book and they started signing it. So imagine that, like an engineer who wrote an O'Reilly book has an autographed textbook. So it's a weird form of celebrity. But to your point too, like we would do things where we would have our ambassadors just buy pizzas in the study halls and stuff like that, you know, just to kind of get name recognition out there. Because and there's people on this call, I'm sure, that work for larger FANG companies that just being able to go back and tell your parents, I got an interview with X company, it's like this prideful moment. And some of us don't have that name cachet. So keeping things front of mind, not just to your point, giving out like stress balls or anything that like is, you know, discount on the branding site. But really do engaging folks and making sure that the folks who are your ambassadors have had good, authentic, you know, diversity-centric, community-embracing, values-aligned experiences themselves, right? Because, you know, eagles fly with eagles. There's a lot of different sort of ways to say that, but they need to be able to talk about what a good time they've had. And that goes back to when they're actually working for you or with you or alongside folks in your company, that you show them the respect that they deserve. So I mean, everything kind of tacks on top of itself. We got about 10 minutes left. Looks like we have one question remaining about an example of an internal summit. I think that might be more you, Brittany, but I think we talked a little bit about the summit piece, right?
Yeah. And I answered, I think also, it'll be a little bit redundant, but I'll be quick about it. So summit for us, it's like another term for a conference. We've done virtual summits the past 2 years, maybe it's 3 years. What is time anymore? But basically what the format looks like is like 3 hours with different types of duos. It's like 30 to 40 minute sessions. Duos is what we call ourselves. It'll be like intro, then we'll do breakout rooms. So I know that's like that has been the most beneficial, where we will have a product manager in one, an engineer in another, and a product designer, and then have these students go to these rooms that they're most interested in, or even have people circulate throughout just to learn a little bit more about like what does that person do in that role. We'll also have sessions on like how to network and like how to build communities and like break down these buzzwords and what they really mean. And they're buzzwords for a good reason. Like it's because we are talking about it so much and we should be, but just making it seem like a little bit more human and personable. But yeah, that's really just what a summit is. It's like your own personalization of what you want to get across and share and what you want to learn from these candidates. And again, building that community and opening up opportunities, especially for us, our summits focus on underrepresented populations within tech, building opportunities for these connections with not just us, but with each other, with other students who are also interested.
Awesome. So you guys are duos. Nicole, what are you guys? You guys gustos?
We are Gusties.
Gusties.
Yeah, and our customers are Gustomers. So.
Oh, see, look at that. Rise, gustos. I like it.
That is perfect for you. Gustomers. That's it.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're pretty well wrapped up. I will just thank everybody. This was a really cool experience. I'm really happy we got to do this. And I'll hand it off to Nicole if you want to say your goodbye, and then Brittany can take us home. And then we'll hand it over to Megan for the final goodbye.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This was a really fun discussion. I honestly, even in like our pre-meeting, I was just learning so much from Brittany too. I'm like, oh, these are great ideas. Like we should be doing something like this. And I just hope that, you know, we were able to provide value and insight to all the other TA professionals on the call. And as always, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and happy to connect.
Yep, learned a bunch in our pre-meeting and the session too. So super thankful to both Nicole and Jason and Megan, of course. But I would not be a good recruiter if I didn't plug that I have an open university recruiting role, and we have other talent acquisition roles. But please reach out to me. Not that you're here with your coworkers, not that you should leave where you are, but I do have openings, or if you know of someone, so please email me directly. I'm just Brittany, my name, at duolingo.com.
Awesome. Thank you both. All right, Megan.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason, Brittany, and Nicole, for such an informative session. And thank you to today's participants for attending. The recording will be available in 5 to 7 business days. This concludes the webinar, and have a nice day.